Hey, welcome back to another edition of Everything Football 62. I'm your host, Jonathan Big Tex Johnson, a.k.a. Uncle Tex, a.k.a. Professor Tex. How y'all doing today on this Saturday? It's about to rain out here where I'm at, so we're going to see what happens here. But nice week this week. Pretty active as far as news is concerned, and I'll go ahead and speak up on it. It's funny. I was already kind of looking at... I had thought about this. This was the funniest thing about this. I thought about this before, and I never really understood, like, how is it that you can sit up there and you have stats for, a lot of different things, but you don't have stats for guys sacking quarterbacks, even though the term, Deacon, coined that term and everything like that. But that's a big thing when you tackle the quarterback behind the line of scrimmage, because he's so far back, and when he drops back, that's like by anywhere from 8, 9, 10, 15 yard losses. So that's huge when you're dealing with territory and whatnot and everything. So I don't understand why they didn't have it. So they started from 1960 on up to now. A lot of guys got a lot of sacks now, and this and that and that and this and everything like that, which is fine. It doesn't really change a lot, but it's fine. I don't understand why they never did it in the first place. I can lock me in a room, pay me some good money and stuff like that. I'll go through the whole thing, ask you what you want. Hell, I can do that for you. Hell, that'd have been easy for me to do. You know what I'm saying? But, that's something they just did now, starting from 1960 and whatnot. So a lot of guys got their sack totals up and everything like that, which is fine. And some guys, already know. Deacon Jones was already telling jokers how many sacks he had. And, to be fair, with this whole situation, it's like, and one thing that has to be noted, it's like, Deacon Jones, as you see by the title, it was like, he's the Godfather. He's the Godfather. He's the Godfather of this whole thing. See, now let's do this here. I'll do this. We'll go down the line, and I read an article. I was doing research on Lynn Ford, who was a defensive end as well as an end that played for that of the Cleveland Browns for Paul Brown, no championship years and whatnot in the and whatnot. And so by 1969, when it was coming to the 50th year anniversary of the NFL, they had named Gino Marchetti the best defensive end. He edged out Lynn Ford. Now, he has a lot more, the accomplishments insofar as, Marchetti, I think, was like 11-time Pro Bowler, 7-time All-Pro, all that kind of stuff, right? Lynn Ford was like, 4 or 5-time All-Pro first team, 4 or 5-time Pro Bowler. But he made, as I'm reading and whatnot, he made just majorly big plays. He made big plays after big play, and for a 5-year stretch, he made a lot of big plays, caused a lot of fumbles, recovered a lot of fumbles and whatnot. He recovered a lot of fumbles and whatnot. And for him to jump over guys like whether it be Andy Robustelli, whether it was Andy Robustelli and different guys like that, Willie Davis, Doug Atkins, and a lot of them different guys at that time, for him to be right there in the conversation for a guy that played in the 40s and going into 57, which was his last, I think was his 57 or 58, would have been his last year that he played. That speaks volumes on what he did. The deep thought about Gino Marchetti, who retired in 1964. Ironically enough, that was the year when that started beginning the transformation of David Jones going into being Deacon Jones in 64. If you go to 1964 with Deacon Jones, from 64 to 69, he was the best in the business. He, by bar none, the best in the business and the things that he did. And we can sit up there and go through a lot of things that what he did and why he's considered the Godfather in this whole thing. You're talking about somebody who has the most 15-plus sacks season all time. He has 6. He has the most 20-plus sack season all time. He has 3. He has the most time leading the NFL in sacks. He did it 5 times. The closest is Reggie White, who did it twice. You follow? And you're talking about he played 14 years. From 64 to 69, you're talking about somebody that tallied 115 sacks in 6 seasons. Even his first few years in the league, 61, 62, 63, not a lot of recognition. He averaged 9 sacks a game. 9 sacks per year. And then by 64, like that. And then, of course, he, from 64 to 69, You can't get any better than that. And coining the term sack. I said because what made Deacon Jones so extraordinary, because he's like 6'4", 6'5", and he was, 265, 270. And what made him stand out on film was the fact that he was just as fast as running backs. And when you got a guy like that fast and coming off the end and doing what he did, I'm just like, he made for the modern day defensive end player, outside linebacker, whatever you want to call it or whatever. He made for that guy. And he's that guy. And he's at the 173 sacks and whatnot. Now, if you take the White, when you're talking about Reggie White and Smith, and I just did a show a couple of months ago when I was talking about my guys who, and you guys stay tuned. I will be revealing my 100th anniversary, even though it's a couple years past now. But my Super 22 team, 11 offense, 11 defense, punter, kicker. And letting you know, I'll give you a little secret about the defensive ends and whatnot, who I think is the best and whatnot. And guys can leave stuff below and tell me what you think. But it's like, with Reggie White and Bruce Smith, it's just like Reggie White country strong. I mean, could move a tractor and everything like that. You're talking about somebody that played at a time, and you're talking about Reggie White, who sit up there and basically was like, you're talking about 13-time Pro Bowler, 8-time first team All-Pro, probably 3 or 4 second teams, Super Bowl champ, all 80s, all 90s team, defensive player of the year twice, got a ring, and you got somebody that come up with 198 sacks. And mind you now, he didn't play, he did not play in the 99 season. He retired and then came back for a year at age 39, right? So that's 100 and finishing up with, I think, if I'm not mistaken, with 198 sacks, which he probably could have beat Bruce. So when you start breaking stuff down, and this is the thing, this is what everybody needs to start looking at and start recognizing here, because like I tell you, numbers don't lie and get emotional, people do, right? So one of the things that I end up doing is like I started being like, okay, like Deacon Jones, bar none, Godfather, that's him, all praises due. All praises due. We go to Bruce Smith, right? Coming to the league 85, Bruce Smith. I mean, 11-time Pro Bowler, 8-time All-Pro, 3 or 4 times second team All-Pro, Defensive Player of the Year, a couple times, 90s, 80s, and 90s. Him and Reggie White is neck to neck, and I'm just like, these are guys with major size, speed, strength, and everything like that. Remember, Bruce Smith came in 6'4", 6'5", 6'4", or whatever, out of Vitek. You know what I'm saying? The hokey. You know what I'm saying? So it's just like, he comes out, he's like 300 pounds. He got a little trouble, he's a little overweight, this is that, and that, got a little trouble with the drugs or whatever, this is that, and there for a hot second. Then Bruce Smith turns himself into a fucking physical specimen. He's like a V. So he's like 6'4", about 270. And he's causing havoc in the AFC. 4 Super Bowls, unfortunately didn't win one, but 4 Super Bowls, he was always on winning teams. And so, and he played shit. Bruce played what? He played 20 years, 200 sacks. And I've already read the other accolades and whatnot that he did. So it's hard not to sit up there and not and take, well, I'm going to take Deacon and put him here and this is that, the other. And then the competition was so stiff. Look, you're talking about Chris Dolman. You're talking about Charles Haley. You're talking about, if you're throwing outside linebackers in the 3-4 rushing, Lawrence Taylor, Ricky Jackson, Pat Swilling, Kevin Green, Bryce Pop. We can sit up there and go on and on and on. Those and just as rushing. Now, if you want to go into defensive ends, we can do that too and whatnot. So if we just get right down to it. And so it's like these guys, when we start talking about the amount of guys that sit up there and play this particular game, defensive end, when Deacon played there in the 60s, you had, like I said, Lamar Lundy, Doug Atkins, Willie Davis, Gino Markelli finished up in 64, right? So you didn't have a plethora of guys in the 60s You move to the 80s when you start, let's say like about 85. All those guys that I named, Richard Dent, Dan Hampton. I think Dan Hampton was defensive end. I think him and and you're talking about like two guys that were like that were when we start speaking about these types of guys, man, I'm like the competition. It was way more. It was better defensive end play back during that particular point in time in 85 and going into like 95 into 2000 than what it was going on for that of Deacon Jones. Deacon Jones dominated. It's not to ever take anything away from him, but with his stats, his stats speak for themselves. He's right there. His stats speaks for themselves, and I'm never going to sit up there and discredit anything that Deacon Jones did. You know what I'm saying? Like I said, all praise. We talking about Howie Long. Dan Hampton played defensive tackle and whatnot, but we're talking about Howie Long. Talking about even guys like Leroy Selman. Those guys played in a particular era where it's just like that. The competition was extremely fierce, especially when you throw in the 3-4 defense. Now you start having outside linebackers, Andre Tippett, Ricky Jackson, different guys like that. All the great Lawrence Taylor, all of those guys. So it's like, it was so many great defensive ends, so many great defensive ends that played the game and whatnot in that particular era. We're not even talking about, I'm not even dealing with the 70s because they don't even match up. And that's another thing. It is written where Harvey, because all of this came about because they started counting. Al Bubba Baker had 23 sacks as a rookie in 1978. But people, if you go and look at Dallas in 77, Harvey Martin was like Defensive Player of the Year, and he had 23 sacks. Pro Football Reference stood up there and said he had 20. Dallas said he had 23. So what are we talking about here? I was like, well, damn, but Michael Strahan don't really have that record or whatever and stuff like that. So everybody says unofficial, but I'm just like, I just think NFL was just extremely lazy at that particular time. But again, like I say, but I would always say, and I like I said, I already did a show on it. My ends is Reggie White and Bruce Smith, and because I'm like, the physicality of them guys and the amount of competition that they had back during that time, in from 85 to 2000. I'm like, go look at the pass rushes. I've already named some of them. Go look at them, and then compare who Deacon Jones was going up against, and compare who was like somebody like, let's say, Reggie White was going up against, because they'll put Reggie White above Bruce Smith. But I'm like, and whatnot, and look at the competition. It's not even close. It's not even close. So that's why I always put them guys there and whatnot. And Deacon, I'm like, he's right there though. He could be right there. He could play in this era easily because he had the type of size and whatnot. So it's like, but that's what I'm talking about, the speed and everything like that. So when you start breaking a lot of that stuff down like that, it's major. So like I say, again, never to take anything from the great Deacon Jones. I'm just saying he's the Godfather no matter what, and he's hovering around there. You know what I'm saying? He's hovering around there. And for people to want to sit up there and sidetrack, you know what I'm saying? I can't, you can't help what era you were born in and what era you played in. You was born in the 60s, that means shit, you was born in the 60s, and ain't nothing you can do about that. What did you do that? And those guys, you're talking about 8-time All-Pro, and not even talking about, those guys are like 10, 11, 12 times All-Pro. 8-time first team. 198 sacks to that of 200 sacks. What Deacon Jones did was astronomical. But his competition, what other competition did he have? And those guys had way stiffer competition at the defensive end, as was pass rushing. Just the whole sack thing, for the whole sack thing to even come up there, it's like way more than what that of Deacon. It's like Deacon didn't have no competition. He was head and shoulders above everybody. I read the stats out what he did. Those guys had to continue. Andre Tippett, whether it was Lawrence Taylor, these outside linebackers on defensive, Chris Dolan, Charles Haley, Bryce Pop, Kevin Green. We can just keep, going. Richard Dent. You know what I'm saying? We could just keep going on and on and on and on and on. And it's just like, I'm like, so that's why I put them guys there at that particular position and whatnot. But Deacon Jones, I mean, this is, like I said, it's 173 sacks. And he's in the 14-game schedule. I can't take that take that from him. 14 games, and then from 64 to 69, he was the best defensive player probably in the game, bar none. They can holler and yell shit with whether they can holler shit about Dick Buckets, but Chicago wasn't winning. And really, if you really look at it, it was like 60. The Rams really started winning around 66, 67, 68, 69. For about a 3-year span, they won like 30-some-odd games, won the division, but Deacon only played in a couple of playoff games. And there's 2 divisional games that they actually lost. Compared to those guys who I'm talking about, it's like it's not even close. So you got to still do some winning here and whatnot. And then later on, like I said, in talking about the 70s, whether it was L.C. Greenwood, Youngblood, a lot of those guys and whatnot and everything. Them guys did their thing and whatnot, but it's like not Deacon. Them guys are not, not Deacon Jones. So yeah, Deacon Jones the Godfather. But at the same time, if I'm assembling my defensive ends, Bruce Smith, Reggie White, just because the body of work. That's the whole thing. The body of work was so more broad. And the competition was way more fierce because, we got Willie Davis, Doug Atkins, you can throw Lamar Lundy in there or whatever, whomever you want to throw up in there. It's like those guys that, what I'm saying? I mean, the list is small. I can start sitting up there going in all of the different guys that played in the era of from 85 on to like at least 2000. I'm like, come on, dude. It's like so many guys, man. So many great defensive ends that played in the league at that particular time. That is just like you just can't you just cannot fathom that amount. The number is staggering. So many guys and different sack leaders and whatnot. And for what Deacon did, that was just great. But nobody else was touching him at that time. He had other guys that was like, closer right there and came up and had a couple of good. I even forget Mark Gastineau, who, in my opinion, because everybody wants to talk about, well, he wasn't good against the run or whatever like that. I'm like I said, his career is real similar, and I did this way back, real similar to that of J.J. Watt. You can try to diss on him because of the sack dance and all that other bullshit, but it's like, nah, Gastineau was like that. And a physical specimen. He could play. You can't say he couldn't play. So, I say that's what I'm talking about. So, that's something to look at, man. That's why I wanted to bring out to you guys today, man, and whatnot. And like I said, Deacon Jones, the Godfather, and did everything that he was supposed to have done. And I loved him. I love his talk. I love when he sit up there, the shit that he would say out of his mouth. I love that shit. I thought it was the best in some of the things that he said. One of my favorite quotes, when he's talking about the head slap and all that other type of stuff. I'm like, man, that's just, that was a different era, different time, different everything, and everybody has an issue with a lot of that type of stuff. But there's no need to have an issue about that kind of stuff. It is, hell, he said what he said. You know what I'm saying? He said what he said. So you know what I'm saying? So I would always love that. Like I said, when he, the different things that he would say. When he's talking about the head slap. His back as I possibly could. Loved him. You talking about that head slap. Brimstone fueled the relentless pursuit that reflected the Deacon's doctrine of search and destroy. Sacking the cornerback is just like. But as he knew how to get a leg up on but it's like the Secretary of Defense was not averse to playing dirty pop. He said with the head slap, he said you have a tendency to he said if you go upside a man's head or a woman's head, they took it out now. But I found it was if you have a tendency to go upside a man's head, woman's head, they tend to blink. And this is a different era, different dudes, man. Different eras, different dudes. And that's true. And he did what he did. And that's why he was able to dominate and do what he does. So, definitely shout out to the great Deacon Jones and whatnot. This went on a little long, but I just wanted to put that out there to you guys and whatnot. So it's like, he was one of a kind. One of a kind. Love to hear him. Any interview that he had. Y'all guys, plenty of stuff on YouTube. You go check him out. Tell you guys all the time, there's no greatest of all time. Smash that like button. Subscribe to the channel. And whatnot. And tell you guys all the time, there's no greatest of all time. As long as time's still going on, tell you guys all the time, numbers don't lie and get emotional. People do. Guys, have a good one.